The night was quiet, almost deceptively so, in the critical care unit of Mercy General Hospital. I had been on shift for nearly 12 hours, the hum of ventilators and the soft beeping of monitors my constant companions. And then everything changed. The emergency doors burst open and nurses wheeled in a patient who looked like she had already been pulled from the jaws of death itself. Her name was Laura Simmons, 42, vibrant, a mother, a daughter, a woman whose life should have still been unfolding in ordinary ways. Instead, she arrived lifeless, her body pale and trembling, her heart unresponsive, her skin cold to the touch. In that moment, the room seemed to shrink. Alarms screamed and lights flashed red, casting shadows across the anxious faces of the team. Time slowed. Every heartbeat, or lack thereof, felt monumental. I remember kneeling beside her, tracing the contours of her face, seeing the faintest tremor in her eyelid. Machines whirred, defibrillators clicked, but the numbers on the monitors told a story of inevitability. She should have been gone. And yet, then it happened. A flicker on the cardiac monitor, almost imperceptible at first. A tiny electrical whisper in the chaos. Nurses gasped. I held my breath. A second flicker became a third, and then, faint but unmistakable, a pulse returned. Her chest rose, shallow at first, then with a little more strength. The room exhaled collectively, a fragile sigh of disbelief. Against everything we knew, against every statistical expectation, Laura Simmons had chosen somehow to fight. I felt a strange mixture of awe and dread. In critical care, we see patients survive when we expect them to perish, and we lose those we believe are certain to live. But Laura's case was different. There was an intensity to it, a sense that something beyond mere biology was at play. I remember looking at her, a part of me screaming that she was ordinary, human, mortal, while another part whispered that the forces keeping her alive might defy reason. The nurses moved with surgical precision, yet I could see their eyes betray wonder, disbelief, and fear all at once. Her family, waiting in the adjacent room, had been summoned moments before. When they arrived, their expressions were a mix of horror and hope, tears streaking faces frozen in anticipation. Every small beep, every faint intake of breath became a heartbeat in the story we were living. I walked the fine line between clinical detachment and raw emotion. The fragility of her body was evident. Sepsis had ravaged her organs. Medications pummeled her system. Yet somehow she clung to life with a resilience that seemed almost conscious. It was as if Laura had made a decision, deep within, that she was not done yet. And as I watched the monitors flicker with her unstable yet persistent pulse, I realized that this was no ordinary ICU case. This was a living, breathing paradox. Even now, when I recall that night, the memory is both vivid and surreal. The cold smell of antiseptic, the red glow of the monitors, the frantic movements of the medical team juxtaposed with the slow, fragile rhythm of Laura's returning life. In that instant, I understood that the story we were about to witness would challenge not only medical science, but also the very limits of what we understand about human resilience. The woman who refused to die had arrived, and with her, a haunting mystery had taken root. Laura Simmons had always been the picture of vitality, a dedicated elementary school teacher, a weekend hiker, a mother who could juggle the chaos of daily life with ease. Friends described her as energetic, fiercely independent, and impossibly optimistic. It was hard to imagine that just weeks before she arrived in the ICU, she had been living a life so ordinary and full of promise. And then, without warning, it all unraveled. A seemingly minor infection spiraled into a catastrophic storm inside her body. Severe sepsis, a condition where the immune system's response to infection overwhelms the body's own organs. One moment, she was fine. The next, every system she relied on, heart, kidneys, lungs, was in peril. Sepsis is merciless. The body, in its desperate attempt to fight the invading pathogen, releases a cascade of chemicals into the bloodstream. These chemicals trigger inflammation throughout the body, damaging organs and sometimes shutting them down entirely. In Laura's case, the infection spread faster than the doctors could contain it. I remember explaining to her family in the sterile hospital waiting room that the numbers were alarming. Her blood pressure was dangerously low, oxygen saturation plummeting, and her kidneys were failing. Yet, even with all that, there was something about Laura that set her apart. Something unquantifiable. Through interviews with her loved ones, viewers see a woman whose life had been abruptly and violently interrupted. Archival footage shows her laughing with her children, hiking along forest trails, celebrating birthdays with friends, and teaching lessons in her bright classroom. Then the images shift. Hospital gowns, IV lines, and the incessant beeping of monitors become her new reality. Her family recounts the helplessness they felt, the torment of watching her body betray her, while every moment in the ICU felt like a gamble with fate. Nurses and doctors hovered over her, performing dialysis, adjusting ventilators, administering high-dose medications, all desperately trying to counteract the invisible assault within her bloodstream. Cinematic visuals can help viewers grasp the science behind the horror. Animations showing white blood cells attacking pathogens, blood vessels inflamed and leaking, organs struggling to maintain function. These visuals, paired with a calm, guiding voiceover, allow the audience to understand the medical stakes without losing sight of the human tragedy unfolding. Every day, Laura's condition teetered on a knife's edge. And yet, despite the statistical improbabilities, despite the relentless assault of sepsis, her body would not surrender. Each moment of survival, each faint sign of life, was a defiance that left even the most seasoned doctors questioning the limits of human resilience. It was impossible not to feel a creeping sense of unease alongside hope. Laura's fight was physical, but there was a weight to it that felt almost spiritual. How could one person endure so much, clawing her way back from the brink again and again? Her story would come to challenge everything we think we know about life, about mortality, and about the fragile, stubborn force that keeps us clinging to existence even when science tells us otherwise. In Laura Simmons, we were witnessing something extraordinary, a mystery that could not be contained within charts, machines, or medical textbooks. From the moment Laura Simmons was admitted, the ICU became a battleground where every second counted. The room was filled with the low hum of ventilators, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and the tense whispers of nurses consulting over her precarious vitals. Each day blurred into the next, a relentless cycle of interventions, high-dose antibiotics, continuous dialysis, sedation to manage pain and agitation, and endless adjustments to the ventilator that kept her lungs alive. The sheer intensity of critical care is hard to convey. Machines hum, alarms scream, and the sterile white walls seem to close in. Yet amid this chaos, every subtle change in Laura's condition became monumental. Watching her teeter on the edge of life and death was a lesson in humility. One morning, I observed her blood pressure plummet, her oxygen saturation nosedive, and her heart rate spike erratically. Nurses sprang into action, alarms blaring like sirens in the night. Lines were drawn, medications administered, fluids pushed. Every intervention a gamble, every second a negotiation with fate. Yet, as her body convulsed under the strain, there remained an inexplicable flicker of life, a stubborn resilience that refused to bow to the illness ravaging her. Moments like these left the team in awe, caught between clinical precision and emotional turmoil. I recall one night in particular when Laura's condition seemed irretrievable. Her kidneys were failing, her lungs stiff and unresponsive, and her heart barely maintaining a rhythm. We had prepared her family for the worst. The room was thick with tension and silent prayers. And then, something impossible happened. Her vital signs stabilized almost spontaneously, as though her body had decided to take back control. We could explain it partially. Sometimes, the body compensates in ways that surprise us, a complex interplay of hormones, immune response, and sheer biological will. But even knowing that, there was a sense that Laura's survival was something more, something that defied pure science. Interspersed with these harrowing days were fleeting glimpses of her humanity. Memories of her last conversations before sedation, her faint responses to family voices, the quiet way her hands would move as if reaching for life. Each small gesture became a beacon of hope in the relentless darkness of the ICU. We often forget, in the face of machines and monitors, that patients are more than their charts and vitals. They are living, breathing individuals fighting battles we can only attempt to understand. The ICU, for all its technology and expertise, became a stage for something haunting. Laura's body, battered and weakened, repeatedly refused to succumb. Nurses would whisper to each other in disbelief. Doctors would pause mid-procedure to watch her faint movements. And even I, a veteran of countless critical cases, found myself questioning how one human could endure so much. There was a rhythm to her survival, an almost conscious tenacity that turned every crisis into a cliffhanger, every monitor spike into a suspenseful beat in an unfolding drama, as days bled into weeks. The narrative of Laura's ICU struggle solidified into a story of defiance. Science could explain the mechanisms, the medications, the interventions, but not the core of her perseverance. That was something more elusive, something almost sacred. Every night in that room, with the dim light casting long shadows and the monitors painting an urgent red glow, I came to realize that witnessing Laura fight was not just a medical experience. It was a confrontation with the limits of human resilience and a haunting reminder that sometimes life refuses to be fully understood. As Laura's days in the ICU stretched into weeks, subtle anomalies began to emerge, moments that even the most experienced staff could not easily explain. One evening, a nurse mentioned that Laura seemed to anticipate visitors before they arrived. A family member would walk quietly down the corridor and she would stir, her eyes flicking toward the door, though no one had entered yet. At first, we chalked it up to coincidence or neurological reflexes, yet the pattern persisted. There were times when monitors indicated alarming drops in oxygen or blood pressure, only for her body to stabilize moments later without intervention. These fluctuations were outside the norm, inconsistent with typical sepsis progression, and they left the team unsettled. Even during sedation, Laura experienced periods of clarity. She would respond to questions with a coherence that defied expectation, her eyes suddenly sharp, her voice faint but lucid. I remember asking her simple questions about her family, and she would answer correctly, recalling details she had long since been unable to articulate. These episodes were fleeting, vanishing as suddenly as they appeared, but they were undeniable. Her neurological response seemed to operate on its own timeline, a rhythm we could neither predict nor control. It was as if, in the midst of a failing body, some part of her consciousness remained untouched, observing, aware, and almost communicating. The ICU became a space where the line between medicine and mystery blurred. Machines hummed in the background, fluorescent lights flickered, and shadows danced along the walls, lending an eerie, almost cinematic quality to the environment. Staff would pause in the hallways, glancing through the glass to witness subtle gestures, a hand move, an eye focus, a fleeting smile that seemed impossibly significant given her condition. Her family, desperate for signs of life, began to describe these moments as miracles, though even they were cautious, hesitant to label the unexplainable as supernatural. Medical science offers partial explanations. The human brain, even under extreme duress, can produce remarkable electrical activity, and the body can sometimes stabilize spontaneously through complex hormonal and immune interactions. But what we observed in Laura went beyond textbook explanations. These were not isolated occurrences. They were patterns that suggested an extraordinary resilience, a determination embedded in her biology, or perhaps something else entirely. The question became impossible to ignore. How much of her recovery was medicine, and how much was something beyond science? Despite our attempts at rational explanations, the haunting nature of her survival persisted. Each anomaly, each inexplicable response, deepened the sense that Laura's journey was not merely a clinical case, but a profound enigma. Staff and family alike were left in a state of quiet awe, unsure whether to marvel, fear, or simply bear witness. These moments invited reflection, forcing us to confront the limits of understanding, to accept that some aspects of life and survival might exist outside measurable science. Laura's presence in the ICU was a living question, a reminder that the human body and spirit are capable of defying expectation in ways that are as beautiful as they are haunting. Weeks into her struggle, something shifted. It began almost imperceptibly. A subtle change in Laura's breathing, slightly stronger pulse, the tiniest movement of a finger. We had grown accustomed to seeing her linger on the edge of mortality, to watching numbers spike and crash with alarming frequency. And then one morning, as sunlight filtered through the ICU windows, her eyes opened and focused on me. That simple act, really looking, felt monumental. The room, usually dominated by the mechanical chorus of machines, seemed to pause. Nurses exchanged glances, whispered prayers, and a quiet energy filled the space. Laura was conscious. Not for a moment, not just reflexively, but fully awake and present. Her recovery was gradual but undeniable. She began responding to simple commands, lifting her arms, moving her legs, each motion deliberate and courageous. The ventilator that had been her lifeline for weeks was reduced, then removed. Dialysis sessions became unnecessary as her kidneys showed signs of returning function. Every improvement carried with it a weight of disbelief. Her body, battered and weakened by sepsis, was slowly reclaiming life. It was miraculous, yet it retained an aura of mystery. No amount of clinical explanation could fully account for the tenacity she displayed, the uncanny precision with which her body and mind repaired themselves. The emotional impact of this turning point was profound. Her family, who had lived in a limbo of fear and hope, began to smile cautiously, their tears mingled with relief and awe. I remember watching her children approach the bedside, tentative at first, then bursting with the cautious joy of reunion. Nurses, who had borne witness to her darkest moments, allowed themselves a rare, unguarded celebration. Even in the quiet corners of the ICU, the air seemed charged with a fragile, almost reverential energy, the recognition that life, in its most stubborn form, had returned. Yet, amid the relief, there remained an unsettling question. Why? Why had Laura survived when her prognosis had been so grim? How had her body and mind defied expectation with such precision and resilience? Clinically, we could describe the pathways, organ recovery, immune response, neurological function, but these descriptions fell short of capturing the essence of her survival. There was a force at play beyond physiology, an ineffable determination that seemed to reside in Laura herself. Watching her regain consciousness and mobility was to witness a miracle in motion, and with it came a profound respect for the human spirit. This turning point was not merely physical, it was deeply emotional, a moment of reconciliation between science and wonder. We had prepared for loss repeatedly, yet here she was, alive, aware, and slowly reclaiming her identity. In those hours and days, the ICU transformed from a battlefield into a stage for quiet triumph, where every movement, every breath, was a testament to resilience, hope, and the haunting power of life. And, as I observed her, I understood that her story would remain etched in my memory forever, a reminder that some mysteries endure and that sometimes survival is as inexplicable as it is extraordinary. In the aftermath of Laura's recovery, the ICU became a place of reflection as much as care. The machines continued their steady hum, and new patients arrived daily, each bringing their own crises, but the memory of Laura's resilience lingered like a quiet echo in the corridors. I often found myself thinking not just about her survival, but about what it revealed, the fragility and the astonishing strength of the human body, and the ways in which consciousness and determination can manifest even in the most dire circumstances. Nurses who had been at her bedside, guiding lines, adjusting monitors, and whispering encouragement, spoke of moments that felt almost mystical. They described watching her eyes light with recognition despite sedation, her fingers twitching as if to answer unspoken questions, and a sense that she was present in ways that defied the clinical logic of the ICU. Even my colleagues, hardened by years of experience, admitted that Laura's case had unsettled them. We are trained to predict, to measure, to rely on data, but here was a living example that numbers, charts, and probabilities were not the full story. Dr. Lee, a nephrologist who managed her dialysis, told me, "I've seen organ recovery before, but never like this." Her body seemed to know what to do, almost instinctively. The ICU team began to recognize that Laura's survival was not merely a medical triumph, but a lesson in humility, in accepting that human resilience can exceed our understanding, often in ways that science can describe but never fully explain. Her family's perspective added a different, deeply human dimension. They spoke of gratitude that teetered alongside awe, of how witnessing her defiance of death reshaped their understanding of life itself. Her husband described the nights spent praying silently at her bedside, watching machines dictate her fate, and the surreal joy when she finally smiled or spoke a word. "We were prepared to say goodbye," he admitted, voice thick with emotion. "And then she came back. It changed everything for us. It made me realize how much we underestimate the will to live." These reflections, candid and heartfelt, remind viewers that critical care is not only a medical endeavor, but an intimate human experience, where science and spirit intersect. From a clinical perspective, Laura's journey forced us to confront the limitations of predictive medicine. We can calculate mortality risk, anticipate complications, and deploy advanced interventions, yet we remain unable to account for the intangible factors that influence recovery. Neurological responses, hormonal cascades, immune adaptability, they all play a role, but none fully explain the timing, precision, or determination witnessed in Laura. The ICU became a living classroom for the unexpected, where each day offered reminders of the mysteries embedded within life and survival. In the quiet moments, when monitors are dimmed and hallways are empty, the ICU staff often reflect on the thin veil between life and death. Laura's case lingers in memory not as a statistical anomaly, but as a testament to human endurance, empathy, and the haunting truth that some mysteries refuse to be solved. It is in these reflections, shared between colleagues and family alike, that the full emotional impact of her story becomes apparent, a mixture of wonder, humility, and the profound realization that life, in its stubborn persistence, can surpass even our most rigorous expectations. Laura Simmons eventually left the ICU, her body battered but her spirit intact, carrying with her the quiet proof that survival can be both miraculous and inexplicable. She returned to a world that had continued without pause while she hovered at the edge of death, yet her presence now carried a weight that no ordinary life could hold. Walking through the corridors where she had spent so many days, I could still hear the echo of monitors, the subtle hum of ventilators, and the memory of that first night when her pulse returned against all odds. It is a sound that has lingered in my mind ever since, a haunting reminder that some forces governing life remain beyond our comprehension. Her journey has left an indelible mark on everyone who bore witness. Medical staff speak of her with reverence, recounting moments that defy explanation, eyes that recognized loved ones through sedation, hands that moved with intention when all other function had been lost, and inexplicable recoveries that left machines and charts temporarily irrelevant. For her family, every heartbeat, every breath became a sacred rhythm, a reminder that life, in its most fragile form, is both tenacious and fleeting. Even now, their words echo with wonder and a lingering sense of awe, as if the boundaries between science, fate, and human will had momentarily dissolved at her bedside. As a doctor, I continue to grapple with the unanswered questions her case presents. How can the body, when pushed beyond expected limits, repair itself with such precision? To what extent does consciousness, or perhaps an inner will, influence survival in ways we cannot yet measure? Laura's case does not provide definitive answers. It offers only evidence of what we do not yet understand. It is a reminder that medicine, for all its sophistication, encounters mysteries that no monitor, no test, and no intervention can fully explain. The haunting nature of her survival lies in this space between knowledge and the unknown, between what we can describe and what we can only witness in awe. Even as she rebuilds her life, walking slowly back into routines once taken for granted, Laura remains a symbol, a testament to resilience, to the inexplicable capacity of the human body, and to the profound mysteries of consciousness. Her story lingers, like a shadow across the sterile brightness of the ICU, reminding us that some patients do not merely survive, they challenge everything we believe we know about life and death. In the end, her legacy is both humbling and unsettling. We are left with questions that do not resolve, with wonder that refuses to dissipate, and with a haunting sense that perhaps, just perhaps, There are aspects of existence that science has not yet reached. Laura Simmons, the woman who refused to die, remains a living enigma, a quiet miracle whose story continues to inspire, to unsettle, and to remind us that life's mysteries are far from exhausted. The ICU, the monitors, the machines, all fade in memory, but the question endures. How does one human defy the inevitable, and what does that tell us about the fragile, astonishing nature of existence itself?